The text message from my son hit me like a gut punch at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was lying in my small apartment in East Austin, staring at the ceiling fan that had been squeaking for 3 months, when my phone lit up. Dad, about the engagement party next month. Olivia's family is really traditional about this stuff. Her parents think it would be better if you maybe sat this one out. Just the engagement thing. You'll definitely be at the wedding. Promise. I read it 5 times. Sat this one out. My only son was getting engaged, and I was being uninvited before I'd even been invited. I'm 64 years old. I've survived 2 tours in Iraq. Raised David alone after his mother died when he was 7. Worked double shifts as a security guard to put him through UT Austin. And now I was too embarrassing to meet his future in-laws. I didn't respond that night. What could I say? That my heart was breaking. That I'd been thinking about this moment since David was a kid. Imagining walking him down the aisle one day since his mom couldn't be there. Instead, I got up, put on my old Marine Corps sweatshirt, and made coffee in the dark. David and I used to be close, really close. After Maria died, it was just us against the world. I remember teaching him to change oil in our driveway, helping him with algebra at the kitchen table, driving him to every soccer game in my beat-up Silverado. But somewhere in the last 2 years, since he got that job at Dell and moved to Westlake Hills, something changed. The calls got shorter. The visits stopped. Last Christmas, he stayed for 45 minutes, checking his phone the whole time. When I asked about his girlfriend Olivia, he got vague. She's great, Dad. You'll meet her eventually. Eventually. Like I was some distant relative you had to humor. I knew what this was about. David made 6 figures now, drove a Tesla, lived in a condo that cost more than I'd earned in my entire life, and I was still Robert Martinez, security guard at a downtown office building, living in the same 1-bedroom apartment I'd rented 20 years ago. My uniform still had my name stitched on the pocket. My truck still had rust on the fender. I wasn't Westlake Hills material, but the text bothered me more than it should have. Olivia's family is really traditional. What did that even mean? Traditional? About what? Not wanting working-class Hispanic guys at their country club? I'd spent 3 days stewing on it before I did something I'm not proud of. I started following my son. I know how that sounds. Believe me, I felt like a creep. But I had to understand what was happening. Why my boy was suddenly ashamed of me. Why this woman I'd never met had such control over him. So on Saturday morning, I waited in my truck outside David's condo complex in Westlake Hills, coffee in hand, feeling like I was on some pathetic stakeout. At 10:47 a.m., David came out with her, Olivia Hartwell. Even from across the street, I could see she was stunning, tall, blonde, wearing clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. They got into her white Range Rover, not David's Tesla, and I followed them north on Mopac. They went to brunch at a place called Juliet Italian Kitchen. Through the window, I watched them laugh, hold hands, look perfect together. I felt stupid sitting there in my truck, but I couldn't leave. An hour later, they came out and drove to the Hartwell family estate in Westlake. Estate isn't even the right word. It was a compound. An 8-foot stone wall, iron gates with an H monogram, security cameras everywhere. The Range Rover disappeared inside. And I sat there, staring at those gates, like they were the walls of a fortress, keeping me out of my son's life. That's when I noticed the sign, Hartwell Properties, Luxury Real Estate Development. I'd heard that name before. Couldn't place it, but something nagged at me. I went home and did what any concerned father would do in 2024. I Googled them. Richard and Patricia Hartwell, real estate moguls, developers of luxury condos all over Austin. Their faces smiled at me from their company website, standing in front of half-built towers, shaking hands with city council members, holding champagne glasses at charity galas. Old money, it looked like, though the articles said they'd made their fortune in the last 15 years. Olivia was their youngest. Stanford grad. Marketing director at Daddy's company. Her Instagram was public. Thousands of followers. Photos from Cabo, Aspen, the Amalfi Coast. And recently, lots of photos with David. My brilliant man, one caption read. He looked happy. He looked like he belonged in her world. I felt that familiar ache. The one that said I wasn't enough. Never had been. But then I saw something odd. I was scrolling through news articles about Hartwell Properties when I found a small piece from the Austin Business Journal, dated 3 months ago. Hartwell Properties faces investor complaints. The article was brief. 3 investors had filed complaints with the Texas Real Estate Commission about delays in a project called Summit Ridge Estates. Returns promised. Deadlines missed. The Hartwells had issued a statement saying it was just construction delays, nothing to worry about. My gut tightened. I'd seen enough in my life to know when something smelled wrong. I spent the next week digging. Not following David anymore, but investigating the Hartwells. I used my security clearance to access public records. I called old Marine buddies who'd gone into finance and law enforcement. I spent my nights in front of my laptop instead of sleeping. Summit Ridge Estates was supposed to be a luxury condo development in Dripping Springs. The Hartwells had raised $30 million from investors 2 years ago. Promised returns of 15% annually. Ground was broken. Marketing materials showed artist renderings of beautiful homes. But when I drove out there on my day off, all I found was an empty lot with rusted construction equipment and a faded billboard. I started mapping out their other projects. Riverside Luxury Towers. Behind schedule. Investors complaining. Barton Creek Estates. Permits not filed. Canyon View Residences. Sold to investors. But no construction crew had ever been hired. The pattern was clear if you knew what to look for. Take money from new investors. Promise returns. Use that money to pay off old investors while pocketing the rest. Keep the scheme going by starting new projects. It was a classic Ponzi scheme. Dressed up in expensive suits and charity galas. My hands shook as I printed out the evidence. Bank records I shouldn't have had access to, but got through a buddy at the DA's office who owed me a favor. Incorporation documents showing shell companies, investor complaints buried in legal databases. This wasn't just shady business. This was fraud. Millions of dollars of fraud. And my son was dating their daughter. No, it was worse than that. I pulled up David's LinkedIn. He'd recently posted about being excited to help expand Hartwell Properties' tech integration and investor outreach. They had their hooks in him. They were going to use his reputation, his connections in the tech industry, his clean record to bring in more money, more victims. David wasn't just marrying into this family. He was about to become part of their criminal enterprise, whether he knew it or not. I tried calling him. He didn't pick up. I sent texts. We need to talk. It's important. It's about Olivia's family. He responded hours later. Dad, I know you're worried, but everything's fine. Let me live my life. Live his life. Right into a federal prison cell. I thought about just sending him everything I'd found, but I knew my son. He was in love. He'd think I was jealous, trying to sabotage his happiness. He'd show it to Olivia, and the Hartwells would bury the evidence, maybe even come after me. I needed undeniable proof. I needed to catch them in the act. That's when I learned about the engagement party. Not from David, but from Olivia's public Instagram story. Celebrating our love this Saturday at the Hartwell estate. Can't wait to start our forever. Location tagged. Time, 7 p.m. Dress code, black tie. David hadn't even told me about it. The sit this one out text had been his way of hoping I'd just never know it happened. But I knew. And I was going. I didn't own a tuxedo. Hell, I didn't own anything fancier than the khakis I wore to funerals. But I had something better. I had 30 years of investigative training, a camera, and a recording device I'd borrowed from the security company I worked for. If the Hartwells were running a scheme, they'd be sloppy at their own party. Rich people always were. They'd talk. They'd brag. They'd reveal something. Saturday came. I drove to Westlake in my truck, parked 3 blocks away, and walked. The sun was setting, painting the hill country in orange and gold. I could hear music and laughter coming from behind those stone walls. I'd worn my only suit, 20 years old, and felt like an imposter. The front gate had security. 2 guys with earpieces and clipboards. No way I was getting through there, but I'd done perimeter security for years. Every estate has a weak spot. I found it on the east side, a section of wall near the catering entrance where landscaping gave me cover. I'm 64 and my knees aren't what they used to be. But I got over that wall, dropped into a garden area, stayed low, moved toward the sounds of the party. Through the hedges, I could see the main event, a massive tent on the back lawn, white lights strung everywhere, maybe 200 people in evening wear sipping champagne, and there was David, my son, in a tuxedo that fit him perfectly, standing next to Olivia, smiling like he'd never been happier. Patricia Hartwell had her arm around him, introducing him to guests. Richard Hartwell was holding court near the bar, booming laugh, commanding presence. I wanted to march in there and drag David out, tell him everything, but I stayed hidden, turned on my recording device, and listened. The Summit Ridge returns are processing, I heard Richard say to a man in an expensive suit. You'll see that 15% by end of quarter. Guaranteed. In fact, if you're interested in our new project, Canyon Hollow Estates, we're offering founder investor rates. 20% return. Minimum investment. Only $500,000. The man laughed. Richard, you could sell ice to Eskimos. Send me the prospectus. I got it on tape. An hour passed. I moved around the perimeter, recording conversations. Patricia talking about managing the old investor accounts with new capital injections. A man I later identified as their CFO, joking about robbing Peter to pay Paul, but make it luxury real estate. They weren't even being careful. They thought they were untouchable. Then I saw David step away from the party, phone to his ear. I moved closer, hidden behind a marble fountain. Yeah, I brought in 3 of my college buddies, he was saying. All tech guys with stock options ready to invest. Olivia said her dad would give them a special rate for being my friends. Pause. No, man. I trust them. The Hartwells are solid. This is generational wealth stuff. My heart broke. My son was recruiting his friends into a Ponzi scheme and didn't even know it. I must have made a noise, because David turned. Dad? I stepped out from behind the fountain. Every head at the party turned toward me. The music seemed to stop, though that might have just been in my head. David, I said quietly, we need to talk. Olivia appeared at his side, her face a mask of shock and anger. Who is this? Security. I'm his father, I said, not taking my eyes off my son, the one who wasn't good enough to be invited. Richard Hartwell strode forward, all fake concern. Mr. Martinez, this is a private event. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I'm not going anywhere until my son hears the truth. I pulled out my phone, the recordings, the printed documents I'd folded in my jacket. You're running a Ponzi scheme. Mr. Hartwell, Summit Ridge Estates, Riverside Towers, Canyon View, all of it. Fake projects. You're using new investor money to pay old investors. And now you're using my son to bring in his friends. The crowd gasped. Patricia's face went rigid. Olivia grabbed David's arm. That's insane, Richard sputtered. This man is clearly disturbed. Someone call the police. Please do, I said, because I already called the FBI. They've been investigating you for 6 months, and I just handed them everything they needed. Wire fraud. Securities fraud. Money laundering. The agents are probably pulling up to your gate right now. As if on cue, I heard sirens in the distance. Richard's face went from red to gray. Patricia turned and tried to walk quickly toward the house. David just stood there, staring at me like he'd never seen me before. David, I said, my voice breaking. They were using you. The engagement, the relationship, all of it. They needed your credibility, your network. You were never marrying into a family. You were being recruited into a criminal operation. Olivia's mask slipped. You don't know anything, old man. David loves me. Maybe, I said. but your parents love his six-figure salary and tech connections more. The FBI came through the front gate. 3 agents, led by a woman named Torres, I'd been working with all week. They had warrants. Richard and Patricia were arrested right there, in front of 200 guests. Patricia was crying. Richard was shouting about lawyers. Olivia looked at David with something like desperation. This is crazy. Tell them, it's crazy. But David was looking at the documents I'd handed him. Bank statements, investor complaints, text messages between Richard and his CFO about maintaining the facade and keeping the Martinez kid convinced. His hands were shaking. Get away from me, he whispered to Olivia. Just get away. She tried to grab his arm. He pulled back like she'd burned him. Don't touch me. The party dissolved into chaos. Guests fled. News vans appeared. Agent Torres told me I should probably leave before I got charged with trespassing. But she thanked me. You gave us enough for a conviction, Mr. Martinez. You probably saved a dozen people from losing their life savings. I found David sitting alone on a stone bench near the garden, still in his tuxedo, head in his hands. I sat down next to him. For a long time, neither of us spoke. I'm sorry, he finally said. About the text. About all of it. I was ashamed of you. And I shouldn't have been. You fell in love, I said. That's not a crime. I fell in love with a lie. He looked at me, eyes red. How did you know? Because I'm your father. And I've been around long enough to spot a con. I put my hand on his shoulder. You're smart, David. Brilliant. But you forgot where you came from. You forgot that sometimes the guy in the cheap suit knows more than the guy in the mansion. He laughed, but it was bitter. I introduced them to Marcus, to Steve, to everyone I knew from college. They could have lost everything, but they didn't, because I stopped it. You saved me. His voice cracked. After I told you to sit it out. After I was too embarrassed to let you meet my girlfriend. You still saved me. I pulled him into a hug, right there in the garden of the estate where he'd almost married into a criminal empire. That's what fathers do, son. 3 months later, Richard and Patricia Hartwell were indicted on 47 counts of fraud. They'd stolen nearly $60 million from investors over 12 years. Olivia wasn't charged, but her Instagram went private. David heard. She moved to California to start fresh. David moved back to East Austin, got an apartment near mine. We have breakfast every Sunday now at this diner on Manor Road. He drives his Tesla. I drive my truck. And neither of us cares about the difference anymore. Last week, he told me he was seeing someone new, a teacher named Sarah who drives a Honda Civic and has never heard of Hartwell Properties. I'd like you to meet her, he said. If you're free next Saturday. I smiled at my son. I'm free whenever you need me. That's what family means. He nodded, understanding finally what I'd always known. Love doesn't come with a price tag or a dress code. It shows up in cheap suits and rusty trucks. It climbs walls and risks arrest. It tells you the truth, even when the truth hurts. Because at the end of the day, a father's job isn't to fit into your new life. It's to make sure that new life doesn't destroy you. And I'll do that job until the day I die, invited or not.